I've been doing voiceovers since I was 15 years old, and one day stumbled in a session for the very first animated computer game that Lucasfilm had ever done, and it wasn't even a Star Wars project because George didn't want their first attempt to be a Star Wars title in case it bombed. So it was something called the Dig, and so that led to the next one, and then the next one, and the next one, and because it was a pretty small group of people that were doing that kind of thing back in the late 80s. And I just became one of the utility players for LucasArts, and I was coming in being TIE Fighter Pilot number 3 or Imperial Officer number 4, and one day I was just goofing around on the mic, as we all did. We've got a script in front of us, and we're all just low-level utility nerds playing nondescript parts, but then there's Darth Vader, and there's Luke Skywalker and stuff. So of course we're reading all the lines that we wish we were doing, and apparently they had recorded me doing some of C-3PO. And what I didn't know is that Anthony at that time was doing something in London and wasn't available and didn't want to do it or whatever. And a week later I got booked for another session. I went down and all the C-3PO lines were highlighted, and I'm like, oh, I've got Anthony's script. And I'm like, no, that's yours. You're C-3PO now. And I'm like, what? So when I got up off the floor, I found out I was C-3PO. So for like another year or so, I was,
hello, I'm C-3PO, human cyborg relations, and this is my counterpart, R2-D2. Master Luke, over here.
And it sounds better if you have an empty tin can next to you. So. And then pretty much the same thing happened. I was goofing around reading some of Frank Oz's lines as Yoda, and I didn't know that Frank was off shooting the movie 3 Men and a Baby in New York City as a director. And same thing, Dara, the director, recorded without my knowing it, me just goofing around, and took it up and played it for George, and George just said, yeah, he sounds good, use him. That was the extent of my audition for Yoda. And that was almost 20 years ago. He's all right, use him. And that's the last time I've auditioned for Yoda. So, same thing happened. I go into the studio a week later and repeat, no, those are your lines. You're Yoda now, too. And, when the smelling salts hit, and I got up, I'm like, what? I thought you said, it's crazy talk. Someone said I was Yoda. But, so I went and changed my pants and proceeded with the session. And it was fun. And like I said, that was 18 years ago, so I've been pretty much Yoda for everything since. It's kind of up to Frank Oz. If Frank wants to do it, then he does it. And if he doesn't want to do it, then I do it. And fortunately for me, 98% of everything that's come up over the last 18 years, he doesn't want to do it, so I have. So, but yeah, I've been in pretty much every Star Wars computer game ever made somewhere. I've been in almost all the toys that talk as 3PO or Yoda. Those are me, most of them. Just recorded last week a new one coming out. I can't give too many details of it, but it's going to be stunning. I mean, imagine a life-size Yoda that, depending on what you say, either teaches you some piece of wisdom or whips out his lightsaber and decides you must die. And you have to battle him. So. And it's just pretty cool. So. So I mean, there's always stuff going on. I mean, if I'm not recording something for Disney World, I'm 2 or 3 of the attractions there. I'm in Star Tours and the Jedi Training Academy, and I'm the voice of the monorail, reminding you to not leave some of your children's body parts hanging out the door. when you leave. But so yeah, it's just always something going on. So anyway, ask me. I'm here to answer your questions. So here I am. Yes.
How did you get the role of Professor Utonium and him?
Well, Professor Utonium, it was a brand new series, so they didn't have any real samples to speak of. They had a sketch and kind of just a description. They said we want him to be friendly, kind of, but know-it-all. And I said, well, that's me. And I kind of, I was friends with a guy named Gary Owens, who was a voiceover guy from the 1970s and 80s. For the oldsters in the room, he was on a show called Laugh-In. And he was the guy at the end of, for us. And he was the announcer for the show, and he was also the announcer for the Carol Burnett show. And his thing was he would stand there and go, "And now the news from the Fickle Finger of Faith Award. It's beautiful downtown Burbank." So I thought, well, I'll take my voice and sort of mix it with some of Gary Owens, and that's where the professor comes from. He sort of talks like that. And when I got the part, I actually went out and I had a beer with Gary. I said, "Oh man, I think I owe you dinner or something." He goes, "Why?" He goes, "Why? Why is that?" I said, "Well, I kind of stole half your voice for a character I got." And he goes, "Well, let's hear it." And I went, "Well, and he goes, "Well, that's not entirely me, but it's pretty good though. I won't sue you yet." So, and that's where the voice of the professor came from, was me and a little Gary Owens mixed in there. The voice of him, again, if you guys don't know, it's one of the creepiest characters I've ever done. No one knows what the heck it is. It's called him, but you don't even know if it's a male or a female. It's just this amorphous, weird thing with musical flange every time he talks, and it just, basically it's supposed to be the devil.
Yeah.
But it's a kid's cartoon, so they can't call him, Satan. So they call him. But it's basically just me going, actually what they did is they played me a chunk of a character called the Blue Meanie from the Beatles' Yellow Submarine, yeah. And if you listen to the Yellow Submarine, there's a British version of him named the Blue Meanie. And it's very similar, and they said, "Can you give us something that sounds kind of like that, but without the British?" And that's basically the first thing that came out of my mouth was, "Oh, hello, Powerpuff Girls. Why don't you come in here so I can kill you?" And it was really that was the entire audition. And they looked at each other and like, "Okay, you got it." But yeah, they put a musical flange on it, so every time he talks, there's this weird sounds behind it that
echo?
are just, well, it's not even an echo. It's you'd have to listen to it. It's not an echo. It's basically they sampled my words and then have a keyboard that uses musical notes that mimic my speech. So they just come up with this weird sort of sound that's in the background and modulates up and down with my voice. And it just sounds, and they put like thunder really faintly in the background. There's like 4 or 5 effects that they do, but it makes it substantially weird. So, and I said to Gendy and Craig one time, I said, what were you guys on when you were up late coming up with this one? I mean, I said, it's the devil. He's wearing a Santa Claus suit from the waist up. Everyone thinks it's a tutu. And no, if you look at the whole thing, it's a Santa Claus suit from the waist
Satan
up.
claws.
He's got wooden lobster claws and stripper boots. I'm like, what the heck was that? And they just kind of smile and go, I don't know. Originally, he had fishnet stockings and high heels, but Cartoon Network went, no, it's still too much. So we went stripper boots. Okay. So anyway, yes, next.
Hello.
Hey.
Hi. So, yeah, you mentioned the Dig. That's how you voice work for the Dig early on. Because I played that game. I remember my childhood and whatnot. I was checking Internet Movie Database. You're not listed on the credits. Did you get cut or something?
No, it's fairly common in the very early days of that people didn't get listed sometimes, or their names were written wrong, or you're just not on there at all. If it was a small part.
What were you?
I honestly have no idea. It was 20 years ago. I don't remember what I had for lunch.
I remember that game was in development for a very long time.
Long time, and it wasn't a huge success. It just.
Oh yeah, I love it. I still have.
It was
my
more
copy.
just a test, for them to see if they could work out the bugs.
I still have my copy at home, box copy. Have there been any times where you got your role got cut regarding voice work, and any notably anything that you can?
Well, yeah. Well, only one that I know of did a character that was a substantial character that they just got rid of it because it wasn't necessary. It was a. Am I going to think of it now? I played someone's uncle or father, and it was big robots and fighting sometime in the future. And I think my name was like Grundle or Grin. I don't know. I have to look it up. But I was in it for like 3 episodes, and every episode was running long. And it was running long by about how many lines my character had. And my character was the only one that didn't have any powers. And I said, when they told me they were cutting my character, I'm like, first thing that goes through your mind as an actor is, did I not do a very good job? Or, no, you were terrific. It's just, yours is the only character that wasn't going to have any toys. So, we had to cut something, and yours wasn't going to come with any merchandise. So that was an easy decision. So.
I'd like to ask the question to the character Woodhouse.
What about Woodhouse? Yes. Say it again.
How hard is to poach an egg, Woodhouse?
How hard is it to do Woodhouse?
No. I was just asking a question. You're supposed to be in character. I'm sorry.
Oh, well, I suppose. You see, my hearing's not so good. I'm 100 and something. I might be. I forget. But if you want a good gin and tonic, I can make you one of those.
Thanks.
All right. Hey. So I have will you be featuring in the new Star Wars that's coming up later on this year?
Well, I can't say yes or no because I'm not allowed to say yes or no. At the moment, what I'll be doing in Episode 7 is more utility stuff, droids and stuff like that. As to whether Yoda shows up, well, if he is, he's a ghost because he's dead at this point. So it'd have to be as a, force entity. They will try to get Frank to do it if he can. If he can't, then I'll do it. But again, I honestly don't know if he's in there. They won't tell me.
Oh, they don't tell you?
I've actually asked 2 different people, and they're just like, don't know.
Oh, okay.
They're they're incredibly secretive about that stuff. So, if he's in there, because it's a CGI thing, and the voice for it is done after the filming, theoretically they could call me up a week, before the thing's, done in post-production, and just say, oh, by the way, we need you to come up to Skywalker and record 5 lines. Oh, okay. So, the movie could be almost finished before I would know. Hopefully. But I'll be in there some other places, just doing some utility. You're going to need something coming out of it. We have a problem at detention level 3, that kind of stuff. So I'll be doing some of those things.
Of all the non-Star Wars voices that you've done, which one is your favorite and why?
Well, probably Professor Utonium.
I thought so.
Because, he's closest to me vocally, and, he's kind of a goofy dad, that's me. I'm a goofy dad with a lot of kids, and, and his voice isn't too far from mine. So yeah, it's just it's just a character that I identify with more than the other ones. So I would say the professor.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm happy to hear about the Gary Owens impression. I had listened to your podcast with Rob Paulson.
Oh yeah.
And the discussion went to your work for Visa as Morgan Freeman.
Oh.
I was wondering if you could talk a bit about the process of being hired to play Morgan Freeman.
Well, I've been doing stuff as Morgan for quite a while. I don't really do anything that I charge for unless it's his projects, just out of respect. I mean, he's a working voiceover guy. He's not dead. So, and I don't need the money, so there's no reason for me to rip his voice off for, $400 for a radio spot. But if it's for his projects, like Visa, I do all the Visa spots first, and they use mine to focus group and test and do all that stuff, and then they tweak it and I re-record it and stuff, and then when it's all the way it needs to be, then they bring him in and Visa, proud sponsor of the Olympics for over 25 years, and the only card accepted there. So that's really the extent of what I do. And I do a lot of movie trailers as his voice, but it's always for a movie he's in.
Between you and Corey Burton, both of you have said you don't want to step on Gary Owens' toes, and that's very impressive to hear both of you say you don't want to take work away from another actor and take their voice for your paycheck.
Yeah, it's just professional courtesy. I wouldn't, I don't want someone trying to, there's some guy out somewhere lives out in the West who actually is sending email postcards out to people saying, why pay Tom Kane all that money? I sound just like him and I'm cheaper. And I'm like, I had my lawyer send him a little note saying, well, it's one thing to say, you're vaguely reminiscent of somebody and give me a listen. It's another to say, I sound exactly like him and I'm cheaper. I said, that I could sue you for. I said, so you may want to consult your lawyer before you put things like that out, because I'm a working voiceover guy, so that's a direct threat against my income, and I will view that as such. So, but yeah, everybody who does everybody sounds a little bit like somebody else, if someone says do a middle-aged black man, it just sounds like Morgan Freeman when it comes out. And that's how I found out I did it. I was doing a spot for ESPN, and I was supposed to be. They said, "Oh, do a middle-aged black guy, who's like reading poetry in a bar." So I started going, well, the sun rises over the field of grass, and then there was this and that, and the guy goes, wow, you sound like Morgan Freeman. I'm like, yeah, I guess I do. But yeah, I never set out to try to sound like him. It just was there. So, but yeah, I only do it for his projects, or if it's a parody of something he did,
Thanks.
Sure.
Yeah, mine was a little short on fans. Just gonna do my part. So that's interesting. You do the movie trailers like they're the new Don LaFontaine, huh?
Well, no one's the new Don. I mean, there's 4 guys now that do what Don did by himself, and none of them are as good as Don. They're good. In a world. No. But Don was amazing. He was a good friend, and irreplaceable as a voiceover guy goes. Yeah. But
anyway, my question was, since you've been doing the conventions for a while, right, with giving voice, it's a great place for voice actors, what have been the most memorable things you've witnessed at the fan conventions, the most memorable encounters you've had with fans, and the most unique personal items you've autographed that stand out the most?
Oh, well, the most unique autograph things are body parts, and then body parts that they disappear and come back 2 hours later and have had permanently tattooed. I'm like, that's going to be cool for a year or two, but someday you're going to be 70 and your kids are going to go, who in the hell is this Tom? Can't quite read it. It's all faded, but Tom. Yeah. So I highly advise against putting my name on your left breast.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a turn on to anybody, trust me.
Richard Horvitz once told me that someone had him sign their prosthetic leg at one of these conventions.
Oh, well, yeah, that's cool. No, I've done that.
I've
done prosthetics, and that's like, well, that's cool. It's plastic. But when some guy had me sign his actual shin and went out and got it tattooed and came back and pulled the Band-Aid away, and I was like, oh, no, you didn't. Anyway, so maybe he's betting that someday I'll win the Academy Award and he can sell his leg or something. I don't know.
My question, I have two questions. One, out of the characters that you portray, like Yoda and the Professor, do they in any way, shape, or form resemble your actual life? Like, do you have 3 teenage daughters that drive you nuts? And
yes, actually I do.
Really?
I do have 3 teenage daughters.
Not genetically enhanced, but
yeah, I mean that's part of why I think I do like the Powerpuff Girls so much, because it is it is, like I said, he's a goofy dad, and that's a little bit of me, and I get a chance to react sometimes to these super powered girls, and I do put a little bit of that. Now this is how I would say it if I was yelling at Sam or Jordan or Danielle.
The sugar, spice, and
everything nice. That does apply in my family.
And so an element of your personal life goes into the characters
a
that
little
you
bit.
portray, like
Yeah,
Yoda
sure.
being an advisor and nice.
No,
and
I
my
get
my second question is, what advice would you give to someone who, has multiple personalities and wants to get into voice acting?
Well, when you say multiple personalities, you mean they can do different characters, or they actually hear voices in their head?
No. They just have it's multiple interests. They're not really set on one exact thing, but if they can do it through their voice as opposed to acting.
Yeah, sure. Well, if they want to get into voiceover work in general, that's everywhere. Miami has a thriving voiceover community. There's probably a dozen people in Miami who make a 6-figure income doing voice work and are living fine. But it's all, or almost all, commercials, advertising, because you can't make a living doing just animation. There are maybe 5 people in the entire animation industry who make enough off of just animation to live in Los Angeles. And you have to be in LA. Animation does not exist anywhere else in the United States. People talk about anime, and I'm not denigrating anime, but anime is not mainstream animation. It's not. It's basically dubbing Japanese animation. It's a whole different thing. It's done in different places. It's done with completely different actors. I can count the number of people that are superstars in the world of anime that have made the jump over to, legit Hollywood animation. I could probably count those people on one hand. It's Steve Blum and a couple others. It's just a different set of skills, different set of training, and it's also from Hollywood standards, it doesn't pay anything. So that's part of why there's no anime that really takes place in LA, is because people that make a living in anime, if they're doing it in Texas or Canada, they'd starve to death in Los Angeles. You couldn't live on what they pay for that. So anime is a different animal entirely, and I know very little about it. But mainstream animation, unless you are a star on 5 different series, and you're in almost every episode of those 5 series, you're not going to make enough to live in LA. And how often does that happen, that you're the same actors in 5 series? Right. It happened to me once. It happened, to Billy West, Tom Kinney, Jim Cummings maybe, but that's about it. I mean, like I said.
Yeah, he's got his voice in everything.
Yeah, and but so you can't look at animation as anything other than icing on the cake, and it can be really good icing. Because it's fun. I mean, let's face it. No promoter's going to fly me to Miami, Florida, put me up in a hotel room, and because I'm do the voice of scrubbing bubbles, commercials on, or that I do movie trailers, or the voice of the Oscars, the Academy Awards. That's cool, but no one's going to come listen to me talk about that because that's not.
So it's more out-of-pocket projects unless you're in LA.
Yeah. So,
makes sense.
But yeah, it's the fun stuff though. Like I said, it's the icing on the voiceover cake. But the cake, where you make your money, is off commercials.
Right.
And those exist everywhere. So if you want to get off the ground in voiceover work, you can start doing that in Miami or Orlando or Kansas City or New York City or San Francisco, wherever you are. And if you can start building up a demo reel of some decent sounding commercials that either are real or sound real, and then go to LA and say, look, I'm being paid to do commercials now. I just want to move to this market. If you're any good at all, they'll sign you and give you 6 months and see if you book anything. So,
all right, thank you.
Yep.
When you were just starting out, I know a lot of kids, when they're first starting out, whether it's dancing or acting or what you're doing, many times I find that they're getting in front of the mirror, they're getting in front of people, they're getting in front of a wall, and they're creating those characters. How did you first start out? What's your your little thing that you do to get it going with different characters?
I'm a bit of an odd duck. I never did any of that stuff. I know lots of voiceover people that do exactly that. They'll get in front of the mirror and they'll twist their face and say things and see how that sounds, and then how does it sound if I, put my face like this, I push it like this, I'm lazy. If it came out of me, it came out of me. I'm just a good mimic. I would watch television, and if I heard an interesting voice, when I was a 7-year-old, I'd be watching an old John Wayne movie, and that old fellow that was his sidekick would walk up, and he had a very interesting voice. So, by the end of the movie, I was talking like Walter Brennan. I know what you're saying, dude. No cripple around here. And when my mom and dad came home for the whole rest of the night, I was Walter Brennan. And then they were like, okay, we've heard enough of that. Shut up. Dinner's ready. So I would just do that. I would hear a voice. I'd be at the grocery store, and I'd be walking down the aisle getting groceries, and I would be repeating the commercials. And my sister hated it. She was, I was 15, she was 12, and she was just horrified because she's like, oh God, I don't want to go to the store with Tommy. Because, I'm walking down the aisle going, a sandwich just isn't a sandwich without the tangy zip of Miracle Whip brand salad dressing, the bread spread from Kraft. And I turn the other way and go, Frosted Flakes, they're great, And, Lucky Charms, they're fabulously delicious,
Magically.
And then there was the Vlasic stork, bringing the pickle. And she was just like, oh God, shut up. So, but it was practice, I was practicing. So that was kind of how I got good at it. I just repeated everything I heard on television. And I would watch TV, and if there was a good character, I would learn that voice. There was one guy, I wish I could remember his name, but he was in, I swear, this guy was in every third episode of I Love Lucy. He was the hotel clerk or the gas station manager, the bank teller. But it was the same guy. I mean, no one would dream of doing that today. But imagine a time, for those of you back in the black and white television era, where they would use the same actor 3 or 4 times in a season, but he's supposed to be a completely different human. Like I said, he's the bank teller. And then a month later, he's this. And a month later, he's this. And it's the exact same guy. They make no effort to make him look any different. No different hair, no different voice. He's the bank teller. And everyone accepted it. And, because it was a leftover of, from Broadway back in the day where, they had a troupe of players and it's the same guy would play the, whatever. And Americans, that just was normal. Well, it kind of fed into television. And, I mean, you know it is. If you watch I Love Lucy, I don't remember his name, but he was the other one, like, hello, Mrs. Ricardo, and how are you today? He'd be on the phone like, what? You don't say. You don't say. You don't say. And she'd go, what did he say? I don't know. He didn't say. Now, today we would say, oh, that guy's as gay as a birthday tablecloth. People would write letters at being offended at what a broad portrayal of this guy. Back then, they didn't even know what that was. They were like, oh, what a character. He's a crazy guy. He's always talking like this. Paul Lynde was a big, he was always thinking Paul Lynde was always like, well, I don't know the answer to that, and if I knew, I'd scratch your eyes out. Like, what an odd character. So, anyway, but yes.
Which episode of the Powerpuff Girls would you consider as your favorite?
Oh, wow. I don't know. Gosh, we did over 100 of them.
Okay, what would be
I
your
would
best
say
five?
probably the one where he built a super robot thing and was battling another one. I don't remember the title of it. Where he was another one where he was in love with what's her name, and it turned out it was Sedusa. And the girls knew it, but he didn't because he was in love.
Mommy Fearest.
Mommy Fearest, yeah. So there were a bunch. It's hard for me to pick one out. I'd have to actually kind of review them all and go, oh yeah, that one, I like that one. So. Yes, sir.
Hi, quick question. Do you have to practice hard to do a British voice, like say for Mr. Harriman? Because you're from Kansas. You're from the most American place ever, but you have a British cadency. You have to work hard, or
no? It was just there. I tried to do a British accent when I was a little kid, and my mom says I was fooling real British people when I was 3 years old. I've just always been a good mimic. But what did help, though, is when I was a teenager, I lived for a while in Cairo, Egypt. And most of the people who lived in our flat were from the UK, and they were from different classes, actually. So, the folks, the one that was the ambassador, he spoke in a very much more fluent, upper crusty sort of British thing. And so I got to listen to him and imitate his voice, you see. And a couple floors down was a guy that was a little more middle class, and he talked like this, not quite Cockney, but close. And, so he was like that, and so I imitated him. So I got a nice little primer, and different dialects in the UK, and one of them was a Scotsman, so I got, I listened to Mr. McTavish, and he was always talking about this and that, and trying to get the plants to bloody grow, and they wouldn't. So I got a little education. But I just, there's not an original bone in my body. I steal everything. So.
Can you say something British as Mr. Harriman, just for a quick laugh?
Well, Mr. Harriman is Miss Francis. Rules are meant to be followed. And if you don't follow the rules, he's out, I tell you. So it's just very upper crust sort of British colonel, you say. Good heavens.
Thanks.
But, I use the same bass voice. I use the same bass voice, and I just twist it a little bit, and I take the same sort of Mr. Harrimanist thing, and I turn it just a little different, and it's Ian McKellen. It's like, Frodo, all we can do is make the most of what we have with the time we have left, and then I twist it a little bit to the right, and it's Professor Xavier. It's like Logan. If the mutants are to survive, Magneto must be stopped. Ensign Crusher, in my ready room, and get ready. But yeah, I learned my French accent from LeBeau on Star Trek. my Scotty, I really perfected it by listening to Scotty on Star Trek. Dr. McCoy, I cannot apples with flavor so blue. And I'm the only guy that I know in L.A. that does Spock. Everybody does Captain Kirk. I mean, everyone does Captain Kirk. But I'm the only one that does Spock. It's like, Captain, I find your course of action highly illogical. If you proceed along these lines, I'm afraid I must kill you. It works better when I have headphones on. I can hear it. But very strange. Anything else? Yes.
Yeah, since you got so good at Yoda, I didn't know if that ever segued into Miss Peggy or Fozzie Bear.
No, I haven't really tried. I'm sure I could probably do Fozzie if I tried. Jedi Master, you found Fozzie. I'd have to hear it. If I could hear it, I could probably do it. But Miss Piggy, we watched the latest Muppet movie. I've got 2 4-year-olds, and I was trying to do little bits of it, and Miss Piggy wasn't there. I couldn't do it. Of course, I was several glasses into my cheap box Merlot, so who knows.